Ever since I was a little kid, I loved science fiction and fantasy. I vividly remember as a young kid going to see one of the Star Wars movies, and it opened with the picture of the star-studded space. And for me, it was just the most awe-inspiring image I could think of. The promise of new planets and new places to explore and to go to, it was just amazing for me. It also connected to the fact that, although now my name is Nir, when I grew up it was Neil. And knowing that it was the same name as the first man on the moon, Neil Armstrong, also created for me as a toddler this kind of mystical bond with this astronaut. And I thought that maybe, hopefully, one day I too could become like an astronaut and I could explore other worlds, other planets. And then later on, it was The Land, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and the little kids who go into the wardrobe, and then they go past the fur coats, and then they find themselves in another world, a fantastical world. I loved this. Never-ending story, all the stories about people who step through a threshold, a portal, and then are transported into another world. It was just mind-blowing for me, and it was magical. And I think, of course, I'm not the only one. So many people today are attracted very much to fantasy and science fiction and all kinds of movies and books and computer games that really transport them to another world. And it's just everywhere. And the question is, why is this so? What is the role that these kind of books and novels play in our life? Why are so many people so attracted to the point of creating a whole kind of semi-religious, groups and cults, and they role play and they go into Dungeons and Dragons and they role play for hours and hours on the computer? What's the appeal of these alternative mystical, supernatural, otherworldly universes that people are so attracted to? So obviously, the simple answer is that it's escapism. We live in a harsh world. Life is very hard. It's difficult to get by. There's so many bad things going on in the world. There's wars, there's crime, and then there's just plain old bullying. And wherever you go, it's hard. And so people want to escape. So that's a simple answer, and maybe it's a good enough answer for some people. But I feel, and many other people feel, that it's not enough. And there's something else. There's the attraction to the otherworldly, to mythological places and beings. It touches something deeper. So what I think is all those locales and those strange beings, all these fantastical elements, they seem to echo something very primeval, very primordial within our own psyches. If you look at regular works of fiction, those that deal with normal people dealing with this worldly challenges, so they can be very fascinating and they can be very moving, and of course they reflect our own lives, our own challenges, and that's great, and that's why many people, that's enough for them. But they don't seem to tap, these regular kind of works of fiction, they don't seem to tap into the more, let's call them the archaic or the foundational strata of the psyche. So just think about it in this way. When you're young, you're a little kid, you're not yet mature, you're not sophisticated, you're not cynical. You experience the world not so much through a rational scientific mindset. You don't expect things to make sense, and you know very little about the world. You look at the world through the lens of story and image. Everything is a story, and not only that, everything is epic and mythic and mysterious. You see an animal for the first time, you see a giraffe, an elephant for the first time. It's like some fantastical beast. And even the adults, they're like titans, they're like giants. And every new place, it's like a new planet. So the childish mindset is like tuned or programmed to look at the world through a kind of mythological lens. And that's how they perceive the world. And it's not just a child, it's also mankind as a whole, back when we were children. That is when we lived in archaic, pre-modern, pre-sophisticated societies, undeveloped societies. They would look at the world through very fresh, childlike eyes. And everything seemed to be full of awe and mystery. And so that's why all cultures are rooted in mythologies. That's the first stories that all cultures have. It's not regular stories about people dealing with the problems with whatever it is, hunting or surviving. They deal with the creation of the world and other worlds that are beyond this world, and epic forces that are below the ground or above the sky or within the mountain or within the ocean, and how they really are the ones that are the forces that are in motion, at play behind everything. And every once in a while they burst into the world. That's how archaic societies, which is basically our own selves, when we were children, that's how we perceived the world. Now, as we grow older, both individually, coming out of our childhood, and as a society, and we become rational adults, and we have an advanced technological society, what happens is we lose touch with that view of the world, with that stratum of our own minds. And we go beyond it, and then now we have our technology, and we have our knowledge, and we have our goals, and we're directed to fulfilling our goals, and so on. But of course, the mystery and the awe are still there. Because even if we've cracked some of the codes of the laws of nature, we haven't cracked everything. The world is still inherently very mysterious. Also, there are still many epic forces at play. There could be all of a sudden a pandemic. There could be a storm. There could be a tsunami, and there could be a war starting all over the place, and which is coming from a very primal kind of energy or barbarism that we thought maybe we could put behind us. So these epic forces are still at play, and the mystery is still there because we haven't figured out everything. And so in order to regain that feeling and echo those elements, that's why people today turn to fantasy and mythology. When they go into that movie, or they read that book, or they go into the computer game or this role-playing game, it taps into that level within them that remembers back when they were little kids, and back when we all were little kids, when we lived in primitive societies. They recall and they tap and they awaken that lost sense of awe and exploration and mystery that we seem to lose. So that's why I think that in our day and age, although we're the most advanced humanity has ever been, we have all this amazing technology all around us, the need for fantasy mythology is only bigger, not smaller. It seems to go in the opposite direction because we have all this futuristic world. Why do we go to the other worlds that don't exist? It's exactly because we long for that feeling of mystery, that we haven't figured everything out, that there's still so much other stuff that's going on. And also within ourselves, because when we're kids, we dream big. We think about unbelievable things that can yet happen, and we lose that faith as we grow older. Now, you can see who I am. I'm a rabbi. I'm a Jewish rabbi. What does all this have to do with Judaism and with the Torah? Everything in the world, the Torah has something to say about it, and we usually gain a lot by looking at topics from a Torah perspective, because the Torah is that our foundation as Jews. We believe it's not just yet another story or mythology. It's divine wisdom encapsulated in text. And so if we really go deep into it, and then we pose new questions to the Torah, we get new answers. So I think if you look at the Torah and you look at the world in which the Torah came into being or appeared in the world, we believe the Torah has really preceded the world. But the revealed Torah appeared onto the stage of history when the rest of the world was pagan. And basically that pagan societies had, and their mythologies, they had two main characteristics. The first characteristics were that they were polytheistic. Of course, they described the world as operated by a pantheon of different gods, which are basically different conflicting forces. That's the first characteristic of pagan mythology. And the second characteristic is that they viewed history as something cyclical. This is known as the myth of eternal return. There's a whole book about this by Mircea Eliade. He calls it the myth of eternal return. And basically they thought about history as cyclical, and at the end of days, it's going to descend into a state of chaos and corruption. Just three quick examples for this. So in Greek mythology, there are 5 ages the world goes through, and they start with gold, they go all the way down to iron. And the final futuristic stage, the age of iron, is the worst stage, and it's an age of war and corruption, and the world is ultimately destroyed after the age of iron. It doesn't go back to a golden age. It only harks back to a golden age. It doesn't go back to it. Norse mythology, of course, has the Ragnarok. Ragnarok means the twilight of the gods, and again, it's this kind of apocalyptic age in which even the gods die. Each one dies in a different way, and they're all consumed by this epic event that shatters and destroys the entire universe, and even the gods die. That's why it's called the twilight of the gods. And then finally, the third example is that in the Hindu mythology, you have this concept that at the end of days, there's going to be an age of something called pralaya. And pralaya means dissolution. Everything is dissolved. So, again, two characteristics. It was polytheistic, and it had the cyclical picture of the world. The world doesn't advance towards a messianic age. It goes all the way down, back down into some sort of abyss. Now, these two elements, they go together. Why? Because when you have a lot of different forces, when you believe in the polytheistic pantheon of different forces, they battle each other, and each one is trying to push in a different direction, and there's no one direction to go to. Each one is pulling in another direction. So without this guiding hand, what happens is all these forces, as they fight each other, they're swept into a kind of whirlpool. And this is the cyclical picture of history. If there's not one deity that's categorically superior, not just like a Zeus, who's just the one of many gods who happens to have like a higher responsibility or higher role, but within the same category. I'm talking about a transcendent God. Then you don't have a direction. You don't have a direction, then reality itself, nature itself. The Hebrew word for nature is teva. It comes from the word tabat, which means ring. This is the ring, the cyclical nature of the world. Everything is swept into this whirlpool. Now, vis-a-vis these two conceptions of a polytheistic world and the cyclical nature of history, the Bible, at its very opening story, the story of creation, takes an opposing view. First, it is monotheistic. It talks about one God, and it does so in an amazing way, because the first 3 words of Genesis, of the Torah, are Bereshit, which means in the beginning, and then bara, created. That word comes first in Hebrew, and then Elokim, God. So we have in the beginning, that's one word in Hebrew, and then you have bara, which means he created. Although it's one word, the way it's conjugated is that I hope I use the right word. Is that it's third person singular male, right? Bara is he created, in just one word, 3 letters. And then the third word is also amazing. The third word is Elokim, which is God, but literally it means gods. It means gods in the plural. But because the word before that is bara, and that's how it goes throughout the Torah, God is referred to as gods, but grammatically that's used as the name of the one God. So when you say bara Elokim, you say this being, which we call gods, which we may have mistaken to be several gods, it's really one being, and we know that because we address him by the verb bara, he created, so it becomes a he. So the very first 3 words, they basically say there's one God. It may appear to be several gods, but really it's one God, bara Elokim. And then the next thing is that history is linear, and that goes into the story of creation. We have 6 days, and then the 7th day of Shabbat. That's really a reflection of the entire history, because according to the Jewish sages, the entire history is 6 millennia and then a final Sabbath-like 7th millennium. So the very first story that talks about 6 days and then Sabbath is a micro reflection of the entirety of history, and that's all extremely linear, and it leads to a messianic age. The end of the Torah is the people of Israel coming into their promised land. The end of the Bible is the Jewish people coming back to their land after the Babylonian diaspora. And the end of all history that's reflected in the prophets is the Messianic age, in which all of mankind is united, there's no wars, and we all serve God together, and there's everlasting peace, and so on. So this is a very linear story that's being presented to the world. Okay, so the Torah begins with basically a polemic against the mythological worldview. It negates the polytheistic idea, and it negates the cyclical idea. And it says there's one God, and because there's one God, there's also one direction, one purpose, and the whole world is leading towards this messianic Sabbath-like, that is a state of rest, a state of letting go, a state of being one with everything, not trying to achieve anything. In a way, the linear line of the week and of history strives to get to a place in which we can retire, but in a good way, retire that is let go and just focus on meditating and thinking about God. So, okay, so we have these two elements, and they go together, and they oppose the two elements of the pagan theology. Now, in light of this, we have a very important question that comes up. Because if we read the opening chapters of Genesis, they seem very, very clearly to converse in the language of myth. Right? Again, the whole Genesis story is a polemic against mythology, against pagan mythology. At the very first verse, and then the next, the story of creation, it's all about saying the mythologies are wrong. There's one God, not many, and there is a direction to the world. It's not going to descend into chaos. It begins in a chaotic state, but it's going to evolve and grow, and that the challenge will be to bring it to a messianic age of perfection, the opposite of this chaotic state. So how come the Genesis stories, the first 11 chapters, even beyond that, they seem to be utilizing the imagery and the language and the style of mythologies? The whole story of the Garden of Eden with the talking serpent, that's this Edenic, idyllic garden, something that appears in many mythologies, and the serpent as seducer, it's something we know. Later on in the story, we have something a bit lesser known, but it's there, you can look up in Genesis. We have the story about the children of God that come down to earth, and they take mortal women and they have children with them. This seems straight out of the Greek mythology, where it happens all over the place. You have the Greek gods from Olympus, and they go down and they marry women, and then they give birth to demigods, half-gods. So it's there in the Torah, in this anti-mythological, we would think, anti-mythological document that's all about negating mythologies and bringing monotheism into the world. You have the same image of the sons, the mysterious sons of God that come down to the world, marry women, and then give birth to giants. What's going on here? The flood, which is the most universal, right? The most universal story happens. There are stories about versions of the flood story all over the world. That's a mythological kind of story. In Tower of Babel, Sodom and Gomorrah, all these stories. Now, what is going on here? So I think the message that we're being given is that the monotheistic revelation is not meant to be a kind of blinding, simple white light. That's not the idea. The idea is not to say that the colorful nature of the world with its many gods, with its many directions, the fact that it's not linear, there's not one truth or one direction to go, we're not going to cancel that. We're not going to erase that and banish that with a kind of blinding white light of monotheism, of the one God. Rather, using a metaphor that's central to the flood story, for example, the white light of monotheism, the idea of the one God, is meant to come down into the world through the Torah and then be refracted into the many colors of existence, right? Just like the famous experiment by Newton, he took the white light and he passed it through a prism, and then it refracted, and he saw that the entire spectrum is included within the white light. So the Torah is all about bringing this white, pure light into the world. But then at the very first stories, it allows that light to refract into very, very colorful stories. It doesn't start with commandments. It doesn't start with just the Jewish people and their goal and their mission. It doesn't start with any mission. It starts with stories about humanity, about sins, about making mistakes, about rising up again, making more mistakes, about epic events and epic forces. The colors are all there, but they start with this saying that we're not going to lose ourselves in the colors in this chaotic world. The colors are branches, are aspects of something transcendent, which is the white light of God. So the Torah is saying this amazing thing. It's saying if you just look at nature and you get lost in nature, then you remain a little bit like a little kid. You're lost in your mythology. You're lost in being at awe with the universe. And we want you to rise above that. We want you to mature and realize that there's someone beyond this world, and he calls upon you to become your highest self, which is not the self that you would know from nature or from mythology. We want you to rise, but we don't want you to let go of the childish level or the childlike level of looking at the world and experiencing this epic forces that are at play. So we're going to include them in our story. And that means that this white light of monotheism, it includes all the colors of nature, all the colors of the various epic forces that are at play in the universe, all the colors and shades and aspects of our own souls. So we want the epic, myth-like language and stories. We want to be elevated beyond the realistic, the rational, the mundane, but not in order to get lost in another kind of fantastical world of many, many different gods or a directionless world. We want it all to be subservient to one creator, but not subservient in a way that not like a tyrant that erases your individual self, but a kind of benevolent ruler, benevolent king who wants us all to realize that we are sourced in him, we come from him, but we each have our individual color, our individual aspect. Each one of us is a little bit like a mini God. There is the one God above us, but we have this godly aspect, and it's different for each one. We each have our own different color. So the tricky thing here is that the pagan mythologies, they took all these colors, all these forces, and they deified them. They turned them into conflicting gods, and then the world became cyclical, and that's the world that testifies to itself that it's going to end in kind of chaos or corruption. But for us, we want all these forces. We just don't want to deify them. We want to see them as branches, as parts of the bandwidth, different wavelengths within the one pure light that's beyond the world. Even in Newton's experiment, he refracted the colors in one prism, and then he took all those colors and he converged them back again using a second prism, and they turned back into white. But of course, it's the post-color white. It's the white. It's monotheism that incorporates within it all these different aspects that we have. So to sum it all up, the need for mythology, for fantasy movies and fiction comes from a very profound place. However, it's mostly used as a form of either escape or to just reawaken those elements within us, but doesn't necessarily take them or elevate them and drive them or leverage them into leading a purpose-driven life. That's why they're often considered very something that adolescents would do, or something a bit juvenile. And the idea of the Genesis stories, the epic stories of Genesis, is to serve as a kind of alternative to those mythological tales and fantasy movies and books that we have today, and give us an example of epic supernatural stories with exotic animals and beings and all this, and giants and all this, but to present it in such a way that it's integrated into a meta-narrative, a higher story of a God that created the world for a purpose and calls upon us to live a purpose-driven life. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. And if you find this interesting and you like all these ideas, then I really, really would like to invite you to join me on a new online course that is going to begin very soon, this Sunday, April 27th. I'm starting a new online course called Genesis, the Heart of Creation. It's a 20-week journey into the first 11 chapters of Genesis. The first 11 chapters of Genesis, they form the first two portions, parashot, which are called Bereshit, Genesis, and Noach. And I've always been fascinated by these parashot. If you read what's going on there, they span 2,000 years, the first 2 millennia of the world, according to the Torah history. They spend 20 generations, because Abraham is the generation number 20, and he comes in the very end of the second parasha. And even if you count the verses, you see that it's 20% of the book of Genesis, which it should have been less if you look at the numbers of portions. But if you count the number of words and verses, it's actually 20%. And so we have 2,000 years, 20 generations, 20%. But if you, in the Jewish year cycle, we read every portion, we give it just 1 week. And come Rosh Hashanah, beginning of the year, and Simchat Torah, we're going to read Genesis just 1 week, and then Noach another week, and then we rush towards portion number 3 and 4 and 5. And I've always been frustrated by this, because I felt you need to pause and stop time and go deeper into those parashot. So that's the idea. We are now almost half a year away from Rosh Hashanah. So if you look at the calendar, you get 20 weeks. We have 20 weeks before we start Genesis again. And the idea is to take those 20 weeks and really dive into those first two parashot, the first 11 chapters, the story of creation, the story of Adam and Eve and the serpent, the story of Cain and Abel, the story of all these mysterious generations between Cain and Abel and Noach with the giants and the angels. And then the story of Noach's Ark and the flood, and then the story of the Tower of Babel. All these stories, they hold so much, so many profound secrets. And we need to just take the time to really dive into them, open them up. So we're starting this course. You're really welcome to join it. And you know what? Even if you're not going to join it, I really urge you to just go in and see the landing page. We had this amazing designer. She created the landing page itself is just a work of art. It's just a journey. So if you want to see, it's just an amazing website. Press the link that you can find somewhere here on the screen or at the description, and go visit that landing page. And if you like what you see and you like this, press like and subscribe. That's as usual. But also feel free to check out the course. You can join. If you don't like it, if you're disappointed after within the first 2 weeks, you'll get your money back. You don't have to continue. So that's it. I urge you to check it out, and hopefully I'll see you there in the course. And may you have a wonderful Shabbat, a wonderful week, wonderful life, and I'll see you in the next video.